Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we go week to week watching something, hopefully introducing all of you to something new to watch and recommending some other things to watch that are related to that topic as well. In this particular episode, we'll be talking about a few things, actually. We'll be talking about Welcome to Derry, the It series on HBO Max. We'll be talking about the new Predator film, and we'll also be talking about the new Frankenstein adaptation that's available on Netflix. Joining me for this conversation is Darren. How are you doing, Darren?
Yeah, I'm really good, Victor. I'm sensing a theme of monsters this week.
Yes, it's a monster week. This is part of the reason that I've thought of using it. I wasn't 100% bought in on Welcome to Derry in general. Wasn't a huge fan of especially the second It movie, but I knew it was going to be popular. And there's just so much overlap with other things that are premiering. So I thought, hey, we can have some synergy, hopefully, on these conversations. And very curious to think what you thought of this current episode of Welcome to Derry. Before we get into that, a couple of things I want to bring up. First of all, we are currently also covering the Pluribus show on Apple TV. And I just previewed this with you, Darren, off mic. But yeah, huge success for us here on the podcast. And I assume this indicates that we haven't seen any rating numbers yet, but the audience's opinion seems to be very strong for this as well. Can't wait to hear what some of your feedback as well. But I think part of the reason our ratings on the podcast have been so strong was because this show is doing very well. And I think that I noted this in my conversation with Sona, that there was an outage on Apple TV across the country. And then I read about it the next morning, and they explicitly say they just were not prepared for the audience to tune in. So this could be a huge breakout hit for Apple.
That's great news for the podcast and great news for Prestige Television, because I absolutely was thrilled to watch the 2 episodes of Pluribus over the weekend. And it's great to see Vince Gilligan back in form. Rhea Seehorn is just such a sight on television. I just love what she's doing with her character. And what an intriguing mystery. And the way that it's filmed is very interesting as well. The way that he like cuts from wide shot to wide shot at different angles. And it's always a set piece where you see 360 degrees of the set, which I really appreciate. It really puts you into that world. And I listened to you and Sona talk about it on the weekend, and I enjoyed the procedural aspects of it. One of the things that I keep thinking back to is when the pirate lady's in the airplane and she puts down the lever number 3, and then she pushes the button, and then engine number 3 turns up, and it happens 4 times. And I just thought, I don't know why, but I really enjoyed watching that and listening to it and seeing it. It just made a lot of sense to me. And this hive mind that has taken over the earth is, super fun to see what's going to happen.
And I just think it's going to really intriguingly touch on a lot of things that are happening in the world now. I brought up AI briefly, but for me, because I think about it all the time, I do think it does become a bit of a metaphor for potentially this future we have with our AI overlords potentially.
Yeah.
The couple of things to bring up there, I'll be discussing this in further detail in those upcoming episodes, but I have already had some really interesting email interactions with some listeners specifically to Pluribus. But I wanted to shout out one particular conversation I had with Alan via email, this is the same person. I shouted out his podcast, by the way, and we've been emailing ever since. Songs of the Years. I think I got that right this time. I think I got it wrong last time. He did mention that he saw a little spike when I brought it up on the podcast. So do check that out. He goes and breaks down his personal favorite songs for every single year, going through them. And then he has certain themes as well for like covers and things like that. So really interesting podcast, a lot of fun to listen to. So check it out. It's only available on Spotify, but if you have Spotify, do give it a listen. But we've been emailing a lot, and we were talking about, speaking of procedural, he mentioned that he had heard an interview with Gilligan where he said that he had read a Stephen King book, which I think a lot of people out there who've ever tried to write or are big Stephen King fans might have read this book, Stephen King on Writing. And if you have any interest in writing ever, this is one of the one of the easiest to read and excellent advice for any writer, a writing guide and a style guide. It is so great. And so many people have read it. And apparently Gilligan, this was very formative for him. And he calls out specifically that Stephen King in that book says, explain in great detail when you're writing something how somebody does something, because people innately will be fascinated by how things work that they do not understand how it works. And I just think that's such a clever way to tie it together with this conversation we're about to have about these Stephen King adaptations, this one and maybe future ones as well. Because, of course, it goes back full circle to Stephen King, such an important literary voice, despite the fact that the adaptations aren't always great, but just how influential he is. And of course, he took that to heart, because every single one, whether he was working on the X-Files or Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad or now in Pluribus, he loves showing process.
I own that book on writing. It sits in my bookshelf and I can't bring myself to donate it. I've read it a couple of times, and I think not only just on writing, but it's any creative process. I think it helps with getting your mindset right and how to access, the creative zone. Yeah, brilliant book. Can't recommend it high enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Also big recommendation from me here as well. One last thing about that episode, by the way, unfortunately, so many people just listened to the podcast for the first time. There was a lot of noise on my end on that episode. I'm not sure if picked up on it, but I noticed it very much so. But when I record in the afternoon, my neighbor always has their landscaper come, and this guy drives like a giant mower on her little piece of land, and it is so noisy. And usually, despite the fact that all this noise is going on all the time, I do not hear the bleed over into the microphone, but I did hear it this time. So apologies if it irritated you. It irritated me when I listened to the episode. So I'll do a better job of making sure that doesn't happen again.
I did notice that when I was driving my car. I thought I was having a car accident at a couple of points, but then I worked out where it was coming from, Victor.
It was me. It was me. And I have a quick recommendation and maybe a couple of things we could touch on before we get into the main conversation. The recommendation is I just watched Death by Lightning. Have you heard anything about this, Darren?
I have not. Tell me.
So this is on Netflix. It's only 4 episodes, an incredible selling point that it's only 4 episodes. And this is based on a true story. It's based on a book called Death by Lightning. And this is about the shooting of James Garfield, the president of the United States of America, back in 1880, I believe it was. And just his story, just how he ascended as this, just gave a really compelling speech. He wasn't even running for the presidency, got 1 vote. This is like Conclave, if you guys have seen Conclave, literally the same situation where he got like 1 vote, and then the next round of votes, because there was a tie, he got 6 votes. And before you know it, he became the nominee for the Republican ticket. And he was like a progressive. He gave this impassioned speech about how we needed to be the party, the Republicans needed to be the party of Lincoln again. He wanted to give full civil rights to the Black soldiers that he fought alongside. And played by Michael Shannon, by the way, excellent performances across the board in this whole entire episode, and this whole entire show, I should say. And that's Garfield. Meanwhile, in parallel, we meet Matthew McFadden, who played Tom on Succession, as his would-be assassin, Charles Guiteau, who's this complete loser who had been in a sex cult and like just sees Garfield, and he's just like, this guy is going to make it somewhere. And he just basically becomes obsessed with him. And he literally is trying everything he can to get him elected. And they're like on this collision course. And in the very first episode, they shake hands, and it's this like momentous thing, because we know that their 2 lives are going to intertwine in like really surprising ways later on. Anyway, a really fascinating story. I can't believe I'm saying this about a Netflix show. At 4 episodes, it feels really rushed. There's actually a couple of really, I don't want to spoil things, but a couple of really interesting things about the way things play out that they could have had a whole separate episode on just aspects of this story. But it is really informative, really thrilling to watch. Incredible performances. These guys give incredible performances. It's funny. It's funny, even though the outcome is going to be tragic. And this moment in time where we could have maybe helped correct the history, and it didn't work out yet again. So all these things are really fascinating. And 4 episodes, and it just zooms by. I highly recommend it.
It's a stacked cast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Garfield's wife is played by Betty Gilpin. She's excellent as well. Shea Wiggum is in this. It's just an incredible cast. Like everybody, Bradley Whitford, Nick Offerman, everybody's great. But it's a really interesting moment in history and an interesting story. And brief. If this was 10 episodes, I'd be like, don't watch it probably. But at 4, it leaves you wanting more, actually. You would definitely want to read that book after you've seen this.
And talk about rushed. I caught up with most of Mr. Scorsese this week.
Yes.
And some films they go into quite in depth, and some
Exactly.
films they just rush by because he's got so many eras in his filmmaking. And I caught the 90s because I was much more into the 90s Scorsese. There's a lot of 80s that I haven't actually seen, and especially 70s. And yeah, I caught the 90s episode with Goodfellas and Casino with my son. And so he was fascinated by this doco. He's really keen to watch some Scorsese movies. So yeah, thanks for that recommendation.
Absolutely. I love that documentary. I also felt that was incredibly rushed, especially that last episode covers half of his career practically. But I wish they had, and maybe there is an edit of this. I'd love to see it if there's a longer edit of this someday available on Apple TV. But I would love to see them do the breakdown that they do for Goodfellas. And in my mind, I'm like, I would love to see that same level of breakdown for Casino, of course, maybe a little bit more on Casino, but definitely like The King of Comedy, one of my absolute favorite movies of his, and Raging Bull, of course, they go into in some detail. But even Taxi Driver gets a relatively brief coverage. And it just made me think in my mind, like, oh, like Wolf of Wall Street. There's so many movies. You see how he has this whole thing in his head and he's writing it down and how he's visualizing exactly what he has already pre-imagined. And it's just an incredible skill he has. So anyway, it just made me think about how many great movies he has that I want to see him do that same breakdown for an additional 15 movies, because who even has that depth of filmography, right? That I would even care that much. And it's what's there is incredibly good.
And he's a great storyteller in front of the camera as well, which he obviously gets from his mother, who is a very captivating screen presence.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, he was so much fun on The Studio this year as well.
Oh my gosh, he was excellent, wasn't he? Crying.
I think he got an Emmy nomination for that. So, okay. So quickly, two things. The Chair Company this week. That show. This is the craziest.
Wow.
We could just briefly touch on it, but this was the absolute craziest episode of this show that they've ever had, with these people attacking the apartment at one point. Things have got completely unhinged on this show.
And we were wondering about his theories about the conspiracy, and that was unraveled within the first 30 seconds of this episode. And he's like, oh, I told my daughter all this and it's all wrong.
Exactly. So,
but I did
curious.
spend.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did spend most of the episode. I turned it on. It said high level sex scene, high level nudity. So I was just scared for the whole 26 minutes or whatever it was of when this nudity was going to come on and what it was going to be like.
Of course. Oh my God. I almost forgot that final shot. How crazy is that?
This show is, bat crazy.
How did your wife enjoy this episode?
She enjoys it. I asked her why she likes it, and I think she likes the workplace comedy a lot more because, she said she just enjoys when you do something at work where maybe it's a little bit left of center or it's a little bit odd, and how it can just kick on and like a rolling snowball down a mountain and just becomes something that wipes out a whole village. She really relates to that.
Did she like this version of Scrooge? Does she have any commentary on that?
I think we just watch it and we look at each other and we're just bemused and we just go to bed after it without talking.
And did you sample I Love LA at all?
Actually, I did. And I really liked the second episode. I was a bit scared that I'm aging out of these types of shows, especially when it's a very heightened 20s girl energy. But the girl that plays Tallulah is fantastic, I think. And I think the cast is really working really well in this second episode. So, yes, it draws from girls. Yes, she takes her top off in the first scene of the series as like, I don't know why. It's just like, yes, I can get naked if I want to. It's my show. But yeah, I think it's fun. And I like the gay guy who was from... We see him from the English teacher.
Right?
Yeah, he's a really good screen presence as well. And yeah, I'm enjoying that show. It's a fun watch.
I really did not like the second episode of the show. And I think, to your point, exactly, I do feel like I've maybe aged out of what is being presented there. And maybe I'm just not online enough for a lot of this stuff to click with me. But in general, I like the cast. I think Josh Hutcherson is a lot of fun in this. I do think that Jordan Firstman is the character, the actor you were talking about before. I think he's very good, very natural on camera, and he's not only recently become an actor. I think he does a really good job. And I completely agree that Odessa Aslan, who used to be on her mom is a famous comedian and actress as well. And now she's been in a few things, including that Hellraiser remake that came out a few years ago. I think she's like a real star. There's something really, she's not only very attractive, but she's also got some real charisma. So I do think that it makes sense to have her as this star character. But I just felt like these people are so irritating. And there's like no aspect of this that I could relate to at all. But so very talented people. This just maybe not my flavor of show, I think. But I'll keep sampling it. I just don't know if I'm not expecting to be back on board, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm treated like when I listen to new music and I don't quite get it, but I feel like I should keep listening to new music just to keep my hand in. Yeah.
I really did like the first episode. I especially liked that moment where they play I Love LA, the Randy Newman song, and like the dichotomy of that taking 2 hours to get to the beach and everything, which I've experienced myself. I remember working at a conference in Los Angeles and, hey, during lunch break, let's go to Venice Beach. And we barely made it back for the nighttime events because it takes so long to drive like 10 miles and get back. It's like multiple hours in both directions. So an absolute nightmare out there. So that was very funny that you're just like, oh, I can't go to the beach. It's a whole day. It's actually true. And as the music's playing, like this reverie about LA, that was like the tone of the show that really worked for me. So I might get back to that actually. Just this particular episode, I really felt like I was too old. I'm too old to be watching this show, I think is basically what it came down to.
That's fair.
Okay, so 3 topics, Darren. You get to choose. Do we talk about Frankenstein? Do we talk about Welcome to Derry? Or do we start with the Predator film?
Let's start with Predator Badlands.
We will be spoiling these movies and shows, by the way. So do check the show notes if you don't want to get spoiled on some of these things. Okay. I know that I like this better than you did. I actually was pretty enthusiastic about this, I have to say. But I'm very curious to get your feedback why you didn't like it, because I think I know where the movie was maybe losing you. Because there was a moment where I'm like, I appreciate what they're doing here, but maybe this isn't, I'm not really into it. And then it won me over, I have to say. But maybe that moment, that pivot for me didn't happen for you possibly. But what was your negative take on this?
I think you saw my Letterboxd review where I said Disney is the real Predator. I don't want to be too negative because there is some really cool bits in this movie, but it was not for me. The Predator is one of the great movie villains of the past, 50 years. And to see like a coming of age story of like a teenage predator who finds friends and learns how to care for them is not of no interest to me. I think it needs to be the most evil, disgusting. The name is the Predator, and he needs to be just a fearful presence on screen, where his father in the film was. Right. And I was much more excited when his father came on screen. So yeah, I've been struggling with this movie because I think it'll appeal to a lot of people. And I think it's a really good episode of The Mandalorian, but I don't think it's the type of Predator that I want to see, especially considering the last 2 films, Killer of Killers and Prey, did the character justice perfectly, and they were great films. And I can understand that the director wants to do something different, and I'm sure this is going to appeal to a lot of people, especially being M-rated here, PG-13, I think, over there. It should make bank for sure. But yeah, just the video game aspect of getting to the big boss, and it just didn't appeal to me. It lost me a little bit. Also using Weyland-Yutani androids just because of the name. It didn't really tie into anything deeper. And the male model androids, I didn't like them at all either. They were just there to get slaughtered. I thought Elle Fanning did a really nice performance I thought
her dual performance, that's where the movie won me over when they meet. I thought that was clever. And it illustrated some of the bad sibling energy that they were trying to explore there. I thought that was a good way to explore it between the two of them. And she gives a great performance.
She really does. And I was on board with her, especially one half. The evil half, maybe not so much, but the good half was pretty fun. So yeah, you tell me why you liked it a lot more than me.
Yeah, I mean, I think once again, I think it just somehow worked. And so many of these things are like going back to that I Love LA show. it's a weird to talk about them in parallel, but it's just the fact that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I felt the same way that you did. Like the movie starts off, there's this really great battle in visually interesting battle in this cave between the two brothers. And I'm like, okay, so he's auditioning to make the next Star Wars movie. I see. So that's what Dan Trachtenberg is doing in that first moment. And it very much, Mandalorian is an even better example of that Star Wars universe where I think you're right. And by the way, just quickly, that the movie did open incredibly well in the US and overseas, totally overperformed in the US. Overseas, definitely overperformed, but much stronger than expected here in the US. And it did have a PG rating, but I was wary that I'm like, PG-13, what is this, a Predator movie with a PG-13 rating? And it turns out that I guess you could be as graphic as you want to be, as long as they're aliens or robots, because some of the kills are pretty grisly, but it's okay if they're not humans, I guess. Then you get an R rating, but otherwise you get a PG-13. But so I agree. Then that I just didn't know if I was going to be into this. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Now they're going to this planet, which they did introduce in Killer of Killers. So I did like that. And I did like that we get to see that home planet, but not 100% on board with the whole movie being that. So I was wary going in there. Maybe that's why I was won over, because I wasn't expecting that I would like it. And then, yeah, like then you have like getting the gang together. It's this kind of an action theme we've seen when you're like out in guerrilla warfare, and then these odd group of misfits fit together and they defeat the bad guy. So whether it's a video game or whether it's these things you see in the movies, it's a pretty generic setup. And then I thought it got clever. The introducing the sister dynamic, I thought was an interesting way to go about it. And his transformation, I thought was earned, even though, yeah, it is basically a coming of age, like learning that you could kill just as many people working together as working alone. That's the big takeaway here. So, yeah, and then he goes on his revenge plot. I thought it was very satisfying at the end. So, yeah, as the movie progressed, it's generic in its framing, but I was entertained, basically is what it came down to. But I probably felt a lot of the same concerns you had earlier on, and then I got won over, and probably that just never happened for you as you were watching.
Yeah, fair enough. I did enjoy the music at the start, especially to have these Predator like lyrics during the music, which I thought was cool. What else did I like? Oh, the visual effects were alternately excellent with the actual Predator's face and his expressions, just really, really well done. And then pretty poor, I thought, with some of the trees attacking him and the ultimate kind of villain, the regeneration and all that. Just we've seen it all before. But I'm a little bit sad that I didn't like it as much as you did.
But just to the special effects, I thought they were really well done as well. We are just so used to at this point that some of the special effects are just going to look really bad unless you're watching an Avatar movie where everything's impeccable. But other than that, like in the Marvel films, and what I would say, that this movie cost $105 million, didn't cost $200 million. And to your point, I think that Dan Trachtenberg did a really good job of spending the effects in the right places, because the Elle Fanning effects, like her chopped in half and the way he has to carry her around, is 100% convincing at all times. I love when her legs are like autonomously running around kicking ass as well. So much fun. So that is fantastic. And his facial expressions, I thought that you could tell CGI at first, and I thought it was going to take me out of it. But no, it's actually very expressive and very convincing. So I think they spent it in the right places. And then I feel like we're just used to seeing these like manufactured worlds just looking very cartoonish in the background. So if I had to trade off to having like a really great looking monster or something and not a very convincing protagonist, I think that they spent the money in the right places. Speaking of which, by the way, I don't think I've ever brought this up with you, but very curious to get your take. Did you see the most recent Planet of the Apes film? I think the visuals in that movie, which is just like Avatar, that is 100% computer generated. And of course, they're interacting with people in that film as well. The effect, I don't think they get enough credit for the absolutely astonishing, completely convincing everything. The buildings look real. The camera movement looks real. The apes look real. It's truly one of the most astonishing special effects I've ever seen.
Yeah, the whole thing is CG apart from the one human character. I think it was
exactly.
Yeah, quite amazing.
I mean, they have the actors
they're-
on set, which is great because you could see her. She's obviously like they're picking her up off the ground and stuff. So she's interacting with a person. But of course, all of that is redone over with CGI, and it's completely convincing.
Maybe because they're apes, we know what they're supposed to look like anyway. With monsters on another planet, we don't really know what they're supposed to look like. So it's very, very difficult to convince me of all these other monsters on this Badlands planet. But my favorite was the razor grass.
Yes.
I just thought that was it's very relatable to me. And perhaps that's why I didn't get the movie, because there were no human characters in this whole film. So I didn't feel like I had that perspective. But yeah, the razor grass, you can just imagine this stuff just cutting you up.
I think I've thought about, I honestly, I guess I've thought about it before, but I never thought about it so crystal clear as I did in this particular film. And this is going to sound like a criticism, but I've just accepted it at this point. The thought that the Predators have this incredibly advanced tech, which they've had for hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. They've hunted dinosaurs, right? So they have and they had this tech for a really, really long time. And that they spend it all just hunting creatures, and then they live like in yurts on their planet the rest of the time. Like, why don't they live in skyscrapers? And they have the technology for it. So anyway, I guess they spend all their expenses on just their military, and only so they can travel light years to go hunt other species.
Well, I guess that's some of the stuff that I just don't want to know. I don't want to demystify the Predator so much.
That's sometimes, honestly, that's how I felt with Killer of Killers, which I liked very much. But once I see their home planet and how far away they are and all that stuff, I'm like, I don't know if I needed to know all that. It just makes it a little harder to believe any of it. Okay, next topic. Frankenstein or Derry? What do you think?
Let's go to Frankenstein, another classic movie monster.
Okay, so this is the second time I've seen this. I saw it in a theater. I had very mixed feelings when I saw it at first, but I liked it in the end, mostly because the end of the film really worked for me. And I'm very curious to get your take on it as well. I have not seen your review for this at all. Seeing it a second time, the first half didn't bother me as much. It is still by far the weaker part, I think. But what'd you think of this?
Yeah, it's too long.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating film. I think it's definitely representative of Del Toro's catalog. Some great things, some not so great things. It's told in two halves with a prelude and like a prologue at the end in the Arctic. I thought there was a lot to it that I really liked. I think the monster, well, the real monster we know is Victor, but the monster, Jacob Elordi's character, was stunning.
Yes.
I thought he played a really good role.
I want him to get a nomination for this. I think he was incredible.
Wow, that's awesome. He did look like the Prometheus character for some reason. Yeah. Mm-hmm. With the subtitle of the Frankenstein novel is something to do with Prometheus.
Modern Prometheus, yeah.
Exactly. A modern Prometheus. So I don't know whether that's a fun little tie-in, but yeah, he was really cool. And Oscar Isaac, of course, he does his thing. The image that I came away with was when he's displaying the reanimation of like a head and an arm to the doctors.
Yes.
And it was just so haunting. I feel like it was mostly done practical. It was so horrifying, just brilliant, just an amazing feat of movie wizardry. But yeah, a big Gothic tale, a lot of CG backgrounds as well, which I'm not so into, as we talk about every week. The Netflix kind of look. Mia Goth, I love seeing Mia Goth. She's such a freak, isn't she?
She should have been freakier, though. I have to say, I was a little. I think I love her too, but I think she was a little underused in this particular role. She didn't pop as much as I'd hoped. Maybe I just had higher expectations.
Yeah, I did like her in that green dress at the end. But yeah, you're right. We know how freaky she can get. But they could have possibly used her a bit more. But yeah, cool. It's a cool adaptation. And I think he does his own stuff in the story as well that's not in the novel. Earlier this year, I saw Mary Shelley's Frankenstein on stage. We started going to like local stage shows just to check them out as something to do on a Friday, Saturday night. And the monster in this stage show was excellent as well. So it really is a great role to play. I know Robert De Niro played it at one stage to mixed reviews.
That movie is horrible. It's like unintentionally campy, but it's maybe worth watching for that reason.
Yeah, so if you're going to watch a Frankenstein, watch this one, I guess.
Yes. So, well, yes, I would definitely agree with that. He's a huge fan of Del Toro of Frankenstein. And you see that the Frankenstein story is in all of his other stories, right? Like whether it's
Mm,
Hellboy or whether it's Pinocchio, right? He's had
mm,
this same idea. Like if you've seen the Pinocchio, his animated Pinocchio from a few years back, the ending is practically the same between the two films. So it is something that he's returned to many times. And Frankenstein was his first monster. Like he literally, as a teenager, or as a preteen, started to draw Frankenstein because he got obsessed with it. And he's been wanting to make this movie. And sometimes that could be detrimental. You've been thinking about this project for so long that it could be a little stuffy. And that's a problem for him because I think all his movies are a little too stuffy, a little over designed. But this really worked for me. I thought the Elordi part, the monster story, which is the back half, less than half. I do agree that the first half is the longer part and should be a little shorter.
mm,
But Jacob Elordi's performance is fantastic. The design of the monster when his hair grows in, so cool. Just the
mm.
silhouette he hits with these like rags wrapped around him, such an incredible design. But his performance is just utterly heartbreaking. And this is a much more sensitive version of Frankenstein. He's a very emo, and this is maybe like not my favorite version of Frankenstein. In the novel, Frankenstein's monster gets rejected. He saves a girl from drowning, different than the original Boris Karloff film. And her father shoots him thinking that he's trying to drown the girl. And he like turns on humanity and he goes on like a killing spree. So he's terrifying. And then he becomes sympathetic at the end where he's like, you know, what, that's all this vengeance got me. But in the middle, he's a truly terrifying monster. Here, he's always a victim, basically. And that's always the story with Del Toro, right? His monsters are always the victims and the people are always the bad guys. It's the vain and the greedy and the power mad that are always the bad people. And it's the monster that takes the blame, but is never really to blame. So maybe he could have done with a little more danger in this interpretation. But I thought that, yeah, I like the emotional beats at the end. And by the way, no reconciliation in any version of Frankenstein. So him giving them this reconciliation at the end was really touching. I thought really worked really well.
Yeah, I thought old Victor was a bit harsh on his monster in some parts. Just the fact that he's creating him out of dead bodies and all this kind of stuff. You don't need to see him whipping him. I didn't think so.
Right.
Or treating him so harshly in the dungeon and chaining him up for his own safety. I thought they hit that a bit hard. But yeah, some good points. It's definitely worth seeing. And I also love the other characters in it. Like Christoph Waltz character is really cool. I mean, he's awesome in everything. And also the captain of the ship was great. The way that he controlled his men and controlled his crew, but it was also fascinated at the story of Victor and also of the monster. I thought that was a cool way to frame the story.
By the way, speaking of that stage version of Frankenstein, this has just become available on streaming in the US. I don't know if it's available overseas, but for years it was like a BBC broadcast of the Danny Boyle production of Frankenstein on stage. Mm. And I still have not watched it, by the way. So I'll definitely try to catch up with it now. But for anybody who hasn't seen this, it was a production of Frankenstein, Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller, and they took turns playing either the scientist or the creature. And you can watch them streaming either version of the story. So an intriguing exercise in the performance there.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, so that's definitely something to track down for sure. Oh, another recommendation for everybody, especially for you, Darren. I think you would love this. I don't know if it automatically tried to play it when you were watching the movie. There is a 25-minute, it might be more, it might be like 40 minutes. I might be wrong about that. Documentary about the making of Frankenstein, the Netflix movie, the one that's just available right now, the one we're discussing. And it's incredible. It is basically emceed by Del Toro, and you see how he is such a technician and like really cares about all the individual details of the film. But it's really not about him. You see them putting the makeup on, 10 hours of makeup that he had to put on to play Frankenstein. And you see them like doing the body parts, like all anatomically correct. My wife, by the way, freaked out she does amputations for her job because she works with diabetics all the time who have dead feet, basically. So she's like, that is exactly like the consistency of the flesh of the bone. It's exactly correct. So that freaked her out seeing it on screen. And for me, not a professional at this, obviously, but like I was like, man, that looks more authentic than I've ever seen in like most horror films. But
It was horrific.
it really was. And but all that stuff is like really incredibly well designed. But you see every detail, the scale of these giant sets that they're building, the lighting, the way they're shooting digitally, and you know how the colors look different. You see like how it looks, and then he's talking about how it looks so different in digital, and you see them like side by side. So every aspect, like the stunts, the boat, they built the entire boat, and he's throwing the people off the boat, and they're like going into mats, they're on ropes and on rigs. So everything is done practically. Those animals, by the way, were animals that were done over with CGI. And you see this in the documentary, which is terrible because those animals look terrible. So not convincing at all that they were actual creatures before they CGI'd over them. But all of this was really fascinating behind the scenes. And obviously it's like a play for the Academy Awards to get all these people nominated, and they deservedly should be. But it just makes you think. And my wife was shocked to see it because she doesn't watch these type of making of documentaries. She's like, I never think about the fact that someone is making a prosthetic leg to fit the bone into it. And that goes through a whole approval process that he's approving, and he's checking in on all these different people who have to make miniatures, and then they have to build them to scale, and they have to do tests, and they actually blow up a tower. They build an actual tower that's like 50 feet tall, and they blow it up. So they do it practically, and they shoot the tower, and they composite it with the other stage that they already have built. And all of these hundreds of people working, building these beautiful sets and makeup and costumes and all these decisions that have to be made. It's like a whole city. And it just impresses again that when you see a movie that's, and this is not a 10 out of 10 movie, not by far, by the way, but you think about when you see a movie, it makes you appreciate that when a film really, really works really well, that all these things have to come together perfectly. It's like a miracle. Every time you see a movie, don't expect that a movie's going to be a 10 out of 10, people out there. If you see a movie that is like perfect in every way, you've just witnessed a miracle. That hundreds and thousands of decisions were all made separate from each other, and it all came together perfectly 2 years later. What are the odds of that? And that's why movies aren't all 10 out of 10s. But I highly recommend that. Do check it out. It's an incredible documentary, and it really makes you appreciate all the work that goes into a movie like this. And of course, Del Toro, one of the best people at explaining all this stuff to a layman. It is very much like hearing Stephen King talk about writing. I love the way Del Toro talks about the very first movie he ever did. I always remember this. He said the very first movie he ever did, there was a guy who does costumes. And in his script, he's like, the guy's wearing a white shirt. And the costume designer came over and goes, what's the white shirt like? And he's like, I don't care. It's a white shirt. And he said that the costume designer said, what do you mean you don't care if this guy's shirt is ironed, if this guy's shirt is rumpled, if it's buttoned, if it's not buttoned, if it's expensive, if it's cheap? This is the first time you see the guy on screen. It tells you who the character is. And Del Toro was just like, whoa, you're absolutely right. And ever since then, he kind of learned that it's like all these little decisions are actually how you tell your story.
That's so true. Yes, Netflix tried to play that as soon as I finished Frankenstein, and I saved it for later. That sounds like a good thing to watch with one of my kids.
Watch it with your kids.
The creative arts. Yeah.
My daughter was not interested in seeing the movie, but maybe she will now. But although it's maybe a little too intense in some scenes, that's why we haven't watched it yet. But I was watching a documentary, and she came in, and I did cut out the autopsy scenes, skip through those, which I had already seen it. I was rewatching parts of it with my wife when my daughter showed up, and she was utterly riveted to seeing the way that like the fabric that Mia Goth wears is at first, all the prints are like butterfly prints because she's obsessed with insects. Mm-hmm. And then her wedding dress has like, they take x-rays and they made these prints, and they overlaid the skeletal prints on top of each other to make her dress, because of course she's going to die, spoiler alert, later in that scene. So all these things are happening as the story's being told visually. So anyway, she was just fascinated by these people making their own clothes prints and everything else. And she loved watching the documentary. And then we cut out the sawing off of legs and such and all those parts. But yeah, you should definitely watch with your kids if they have any appreciation for this type of work. That's forgotten the amount of technical skill that's required for this.
That kind of thing with the costumes, especially with pristine white shirts, you see that in all sorts of kind of science fiction-y things. And the latest kind of Star Wars TV series, I get really upset when it just looks like it's come straight out of the costume designers.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look like they've been wearing it on this planet, this dusty planet for years and years and years. It just looks like a piece of costume. It's like, I really enjoy when it looks lived in. It looks part of the character, like they haven't taken it off. You could almost smell it from the screen. I think that's much more successful than just this pristine step onto a stage and film it.
On the negative side of this film, which in general I did like, mostly because I loved the father-son stuff. Another bad dad, lots of bad dads this week, and that aspect of it. But I do think, like I said before, Del Toro's films are technically impeccable, but sometimes that leaves me a little cold. And I never made this realization until I was watching that documentary, and I realized all of this is shot digitally. And I do wonder if this type of movie, this kind of Gothic romance, should not be shot digitally, because maybe that is part of this coldness that I'm seeing in the material. It's like you can see too much detail. Like, it's incredible that I can see like the texture on his jacket. Great. But maybe I don't need to see that much detail when I'm watching this movie that's supposed to be taking place 150 years ago, right? Another thing I think is a negative for me was, how overpowered is this Frankenstein? This is crazy. Like, he can like tip a boat over. Like, what is going on?
So the super strength comes from somewhere. I don't know, the batteries.
The electricity, man. It's when they bent that one node somehow, it gave them all the power in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. In terms of what you're talking about in the detail, I thought the set in the tower, it didn't bother me so much earlier in the film, but the tower set just didn't feel real to me. It just felt artifice. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I missed it the first time around. The whole set up there and how impractical it was really irritated me. Honestly, irritated me. And it was only when I watched the second time, and the benefactor played by
Christoph
Waltz, right, who's made up in this version of the story, by the way. But he basically says to him, well, we found this place. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's like an abandoned water tower, right? So I'm like, okay, I somehow missed that the first time around. It makes sense, the ridiculous scale of that thing. So I'm like, okay, it didn't bother me as much just knowing that, because yeah, I was just like, what are we watching here? Who would ever set up a lab like this? It's preposterous. So it didn't bother me as much the second time when I made that realization. It was there the whole time. I just didn't really pay attention to it. But it is just an excuse to put it in as outlandish a spot as possible.
Yeah, it annoyed me too. Surely there's a little guardrail or just some little lift.
Something, right? They all look into that going, this is problematic. And they leave it there, just exposed the whole time. It is easy for disposing of bodies, I guess. You just toss them down there. And yeah, the CGI animals bothered me a little bit as well, more than a little bit. But yeah, in general, I thought the design work was really beautiful. It was moody, and I liked the style in general. Just like, yeah, the crispness of the digital camera maybe is what bothered me, because in the opening scenes, seeing it initially, I felt like the boat might be CGI. And then I was shocked to watch the documentary and see it's fully built. Every part of the boat. The cabin is shot inside of a cabin, physically on the boat, attached to the boat. And I'm like, God, it didn't feel like that. Watching it, it really did feel like it was CGI. It's a little too impeccable in a way. So it's bizarre that you do too good a job of making it look too good. So it's surprising on my end. And maybe the softened shot on film would have been a better way to shoot that film.
Yeah, that's a good pickup actually, because everything else, the ice and there's snow, there's so many digital elements in there that you just don't think what's real and what's fake. And yeah, I always go towards the real stuff as providing the drama. So yeah, I'm a bit shocked that the whole thing was real too.
Wait till you see the documentary. So many things that you think are CGI are not. And you're like, wow, how was that not CGI? I could have sworn the icebergs were CGI, but they're not. It's crazy. Do you want to do your Del Toro rankings?
Del Toro rankings. Okay, well, number one, of course, is Pan's Labyrinth. I don't have his filmography.
I'll pull it up for you
straight away. Yeah.
I'll go in chronological order. How about that? And tell me if you've seen them or not, and then we can rank them. So his first feature film was Kronos. Have you seen Kronos?
I don't think I've seen Kronos, or if I have, it didn't really register with me. It's a long time ago, 1992.
I highly recommend this. This is my second favorite, only behind Pan's Labyrinth. So I did very curious to check this out. And you'll see it's very interesting because all of his obsessions, he with like these insect design work and a monster, a misunderstood monster. But basically it's the story of a grandfather who buys this like brooch or something as a gift. And the brooch has a little stinger in it. And when he opens it, he like winds it up and it stings him. But it turns out it actually has blood inside of it, a special kind of blood that makes him into a vampire. And then you see him like a very like at practical level, he starts to turn into a vampire. Like he's like suddenly wants this thirst for blood. And it's very low budget. Ron Perlman is in this movie, by the way, all the way back in 92, like this Spanish language film. And Ron Perlman, of course, would come back over and over and over again throughout his entire filmography. So I don't even know how he got this film made. Just getting it made probably was very difficult. But this is one of my favorite films of his. And it's his very first one. And highly recommended. And by the way, he says this in that documentary. He just has the same ending over and over again, including all the way back in Kronos. And it's not exactly the same ending, but it rhymes with a lot of the endings to a lot of his films.
That's funny. So he probably came up with Robert Rodriguez, that kind of time in Mexican independent cinema.
Well, I guess so. I was going to say Robert Rodriguez made all his films here in the U.S., but actually that's not true. That first one was actually made there in Mexico. He's actually very good friends with the Almodovar produced The Devil's Backbone, and what's his name? Inarritu was one of his producers as well. I forget which one of his films. So even though not Mexican, obviously, or actually I take that back. Inarritu, of course, is Mexican, and Almodovar is Spanish. But yeah, so these Spanish speaking directors were, I don't know, on festival circuits together, and they became very close friends, and they all look at each other's work. Almodovar was actually one of the producers for The Devil's Backbone. I'm going to skip The Mimic. Maybe we'll just say that one. For me, Mimic is his worst film. That's his next film. And it was came out through Miramax. He didn't have final edit. They turned it into a very cliched monster movie. This is like the giant cockroaches that look like people. I don't know if you remember this one. It's not very good. So you skip that one.
I remember Mira Sorvino.
Yes, Mira
That's
Sorvino.
all I remember.
Back when she was a thing, she could sell a movie. And then, of course, I think not a coincidence, I think that my favorite films of his are Spanish language. Then he did The Devil's Backbone, which is also very much near the top of my list.
Yeah, same. I think this is number 2 on my list. It's a really fun ghost story.
If we want to just touch on themes of his, fascism, of course, we have during the fascist regime in Spain, which he goes back to again with Pan's Labyrinth, but explores it for the first time in Devil's Backbone. Next movie, a big blockbuster for him, Blade 2.
Completely forgot that he did that.
What's your opinion of that one? You like that one?
Yeah, I like Blade. Why not?
I like Blade 2 too. I like it. The CGI is terrible, but Ron Perlman as the villain, a lot of fun. It doesn't hold up visually in every way, but yeah. And it also has a tragic romance. Again, he loves that as well in a lot of his movies. Hellboy, what do you think of that one?
I enjoyed Hellboy at the time. I don't know if I've seen any of the sequels, but the first one, yeah, a triumph of costume and visuals, as well as we could say for almost all his films.
Tragic romance again, fascism again. His themes are just the same over and over again. Pan's Labyrinth, speaking of fascists, speaking of tragic endings for sure. That's his next one. He follows up Hellboy with, this is his blank check basically, with a very expensive Spanish production. Not that expensive based on Hollywood movies, but very expensive for Spain. Pan's Labyrinth, which I agree, it was on my decade list, one of my favorite films of that decade, and absolutely my favorite movie of his. And I like to see him get away from his adaptations, comic book adaptations and video game adaptations, and even Frankenstein adaptations, Pinocchio. I would like to see him do more original films, and maybe in Spanish, because all my favorite films of his are in Spanish. But Pan's Labyrinth is a masterpiece.
I agree. Heartbreaking, genius. The monsters in it are incredible, and I think it's in my top 4 on Letterboxd. So yeah, no higher honor than being on that.
Of course. Then he did Hellboy 2, which I actually prefer to Hellboy 1, by the way. So if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. And very much a tragedy there, and won't spoil it if you haven't seen it. But just the idea that this like alien world or these monster world is coming to merge with the human world. And once again, the monsters are not the bad guys. So it's a very interesting story there. And a much bigger budget than the first film. And really, I'm a big fan of that one. So definitely near the top of my list of his.
Oh, great. And this was a success, was it?
It was a pretty big hit. Not big enough to get another film, but it was a bigger hit than the first one. Then he did Pacific Rim. What do you think of Pacific Rim?
The idea of it's fine. I thought it was a bit of a mishmash, to be honest, but I think I've seen it once or twice, maybe.
I've seen it more than once, and mostly because I didn't really like the first time. I thought the visuals were pretty good. Didn't really like it the first time, so I tried it again because this was still when I was really rooting for him. I was like a big fan at this point. Even the films that I didn't like that much, I was like, well, I must be wrong because he made Pan's Labyrinth. I'm the wrong one. But then I tried to watch Pacific Rim, and I know some people who loved it, and I just never really vibed with it. I'm like, I don't know. It just doesn't really. I guess maybe I'm just not interested in those kaiju movies in general, but it just didn't work for me. Then he made Crimson Peak, which I also think is a big miss.
I've not seen this one yet.
Oh, interesting.
Another Gothic romance.
Gothic romance, again. Less fascism in this one than in his other ones. Then The Shape of Water. He wins an Academy Award, Best Picture.
Crazy. I think it's a good film. It didn't capture me like the likes of Pan's Labyrinth, but I do remember there is a sequence in it which is quite captivating when they're trying to smuggle the fish man out of the vault. But yeah, I think I've only seen it once. Yeah, fish sex. Okay.
Yeah, fish sex. By the way, there's a lot of commonality in the design, I think, of the fish man and the Frankenstein here. There's like very long and lean silhouette of the creatures.
And we've got to talk about that actor. Is it Doug Jones, who plays the monsters in almost every one of his films? I'm actually a little surprised that he didn't play Frankenstein's monster, but he is, synonymous with Del Toro's monster creations.
And I'm not 100% on The Shape of Water, but I got to say that Sally Hawkins gives a really incredible performance in this movie, for sure.
Yeah, I love her.
And another thing this is more than middle pack for me, in my opinion, and it works better than like Crimson Peak, for example, as a romance as well. But that's really fascinating when you see the behind the scenes. Movie was made for like $20 million or something, and he's explaining how the underwater sequences are done. And they're adding like bubbles and stuff, but there was like no water. Everything's suspended. It's spinning around in this room. And then they add like the water effect over the way to coordinate this. But these people are like on ropes, and it's really interesting the way he shot the underwater sequences on a budget. And once again, I think part of the problem, he spent like $125 million on Frankenstein. Sometimes being able to do anything you want is not. I think artists need constraints. And he even said that, by the way, when he did The Shape of Water. He wanted to make it for like $80 million and he couldn't get the funding for it. So he made it for $20 million. And I'm like, maybe it's a better film because he made it for $20 million.
I agree. That's the film that I want to watch more right now than any of the others. So I've only seen it once, but yeah, I agree. $20 million movie is much preferable to an $80 million.
And then we get Nightmare Alley, which I
really disliked this movie. Sorry.
Yeah. Tell me why you disliked it so much. I think it has some interesting things to sell it. And there's a podcast episode here where I break it down. I compare it to the book. The book is incredible. This book from the 1950s that is way more salacious, has like really crazy sex sequences and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm sorry, 1950 something. That book was written in 1930 something. The movie came out in the 1940s. So I'm like, wow, people are writing books like this in the 1930s. I just think that thinking about the Hays Code, you couldn't do that in movies. So I assume the books were the same, but it is a really fascinating book, and the author's biography is fascinating. So if anybody wants to get that version of what that whole story, which is really truly an incredible story of the writer and the making of that book, the original book, which is very biographical to the author, believe it or not. Track down my episode on that in the feed here. But tell me why this movie didn't work for you.
I just struggled through it. I feel like it was 3 hours long. I feel like there was so much skill involved in it, but it just kept me at a distance, especially the Cate Blanchett character who should have been so cool in it. I just didn't understand the way, the twists and turns that it was taking me. I just didn't want it. I don't know how to explain it, and I wanted it so much to be better. I'm such a fan of Del Toro. I want him to make better films.
Yeah.
And this was one which I just thought was a disappointment to me. Yeah, I don't know how else to say it.
That's interesting because I really did, and maybe that's what it comes down to. I really did like Blanchett's performance in the movie, but I did not like the movie, by the way. I only gave it 2.5 stars. I appreciated parts about it, but I really didn't enjoy it. But I really liked her performance. And Bradley Cooper didn't quite work for me in the role. And he's too old. Like the protagonist in the book is a teenager, and it makes more sense. He's a teenager at the beginning, and then he ages into the role. But like Cooper is like anyway, it's just the whole thing. Like his character is way too old to be that naive at the beginning of the movie. And then at the end, he's like 50 years old. It's just like, how's that possible? Anyway, regardless, I just don't think he works in the role at all. But he is incredible in that final scene. So like there's a lot of things to be said here and there over the course of that. But I agree, it didn't work for me. So did you see the Pinocchio, the animated version on the Netflix movie?
Yeah, I did. I saw bits and pieces. My kids were watching it, and I just thought it was quite stunning the way that it was definitely animated, and it really looked quite interesting. But I can't say that I sat down and watched the whole thing.
I never finished watching it, believe it or not. It's like one of those things that I think I saw it when it premiered around Christmas a couple of years ago, and it was nominated for I think it won Best Animated Movie that year. And so another reason I wanted to track it down. And I saw like 2/3 of it, and I never finished watching it, even though it was, like, to your point, it was stunning to look at, but I wasn't that compelled by what was happening on screen. But I did finish watching it because, to be a completist, I'm like, well, since I'm watching Frankenstein, I'm also going to finish watching Pinocchio. And I did like the ending of that movie. His movies in general have strong endings, I would say. So he does know that he gets that right in his scripts. And it has a very similar ending, actually, to Frankenstein. So it's interesting. Primarily, I think it's worth seeing because it's an incredible technical achievement, but it just worked okay for me. So yeah, so my ranking in a tier all its own, I think we agree on this one, Pan's Labyrinth by far. Mm-hmm. Then I have the next tier down, I have Kronos, The Devil's Backbone, one notch down, but both very good, but one notch down from the genius of Pan's Labyrinth. Then I have like a whole bunch of movies that are mixed, but mostly positive. And that's Hellboy 2, that's The Shape of Water, and that's probably Frankenstein, who goes in there as well. Mm-hmm. And then I have like mixed and just barely, I like it, which is like Pinocchio, Hellboy, Blade 2. And then I have like mixed and really doesn't work for me. And that's like Pacific Rim, Crimson Peak, Nightmare Alley. And then Mimic is just bad, but he just did that for hire. So, but even that, to his credit, Mimic is a job for hire. And there's so much of his iconography in it, like the design of the creatures and stuff. So even when he's just being hired to do something as a hack, he can't help but be himself. So I love him for that. I just wish his movies worked better for me. And honestly, like I wouldn't even take him that seriously as a filmmaker if he hadn't made Pan's Labyrinth, because it's so brilliant. But I know he could make that, and I believe he will do it again someday.
I believe it too. Yes, for sure.
And maybe now that he did Frankenstein, he literally says this in the documentary, by the way, that he's like exorcised this all from his system, and he now wants to do something completely different. He says, I want to be the type of filmmaker that completely evolves halfway through his career. And he literally ends the documentary saying that. And I'm like, yes, now let's go back to the drawing board. Don't make a $200 million movie, and do something really personal and do something different. Pan's Labyrinth, Kronos, Devil's Backbone, Shape of Water, maybe his lowest budgets on all his films and my favorites of his. Every time he spends $100 million, I'm like, I don't know.
And I'm just looking at his Wikipedia page. He's actually done an opening sequence for a Treehouse of Horror episode of The Simpsons.
I got to track that down. All right, we're running out of time, but let's talk very briefly about, I don't think it's going to take that long to get through it. What did you think of this third episode of
Welcome to Derry. Yeah, bit of a mouthful.
Now you see it. That was the name of the episode. Now you see it. Get it?
Yeah, I get it. I'm still, I don't know. I'm enjoying watching the show, but I just think it's just barely holding together.
Yeah.
We're with the family, and then we're with the kids, and then we're with the army guys, and the stories are not linking together for me at all. And I have to like reset my brain each time a new scene comes up. And also okay, so we get 2 nightmare sequences per episode, it seems.
Yeah.
And
We got 3. We got 3 because we had 3.
Oh, we did. No, you're correct. Yeah, O'Halloran's one, which was the best of the lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the other 2 were just super cartoony.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand. The bike riding, oh my God, that was shocking. Riding the bikes with ghosts coming up into it. It just completely lost me. Yeah, and the lead girl is also, she's not, I thought she would get more confident in the role, but I'm just not on board with her as yet. She just seems too kind of interior. She's not really taking control of the scenes, which is fine because the kids are very young. These actors are quite young playing these roles, but the other roles are fine of the children. But yeah, I find myself more interested in the family dynamic and also the army, just to see what is going to happen, how they're going to try to control it or use it as a weapon. Halloran's character is fun too. He almost said The Shine, didn't he, last night? Almost.
My grandmother. Oh, so close, so close.
Yeah, and also James Remar's not doing it for me either. Dexter's dad.
He's a little flat, very flat here. He's doing like,
Yeah, in every scene, he's just not selling it. Yeah. Anyway, what did you think?
Yeah, I like parts about it. Like you mentioned, I'm starting to see the structure of the story. There's 3 parallel stories, like you mentioned. We see Francis that's the James Remar character. We see his backstory. He was there when he was 12. He runs into it in I loved that CGI of that creature in the woods. So yeah, but this is very true to the book, where it is like he had that experience inside the freak show, and now that is externalized because of course it is like preying on that. But of course that's not in one of those 28-year cycles, so I'm not sure how. I guess it is always in the woods. I'm not sure how that works. Maybe we'll explain more of that. But we also see that this has happened multiple times, and his love interest, I assume she's going to turn into a love interest, Rose, who he met, hasn't seen in 50 years, just remembering this woman 50 years later. But there's that side of the story. And of course, that is tying in this Native American lore. And then, of course, we have the airmen, and Remar, of course, works with those Black airmen as well. And then, of course, one of them is the father of Will Handlin. What's his name? Hanlon.
Yeah, there's Hanlon and Halloran.
Yeah, I confused them because of that. Yeah. So Hanlon. So, of course, he's Will's father, and Will's dad is now in this losers club. I mean, his son, I should say. So I think they're having these parallel investigations, and they're all going to come together. And I'm starting to see, I think that's probably what's going to happen, because this is 10 episodes or 9 or 10 episodes of this season, and we're not even halfway through yet. So I think probably like they're going to unearth Pennywise. And then I think we're going to start seeing like almost like Needful Things, where this evil is going to start to permeate the town. And we're going to see these different people we've met are all going to have their own personal violent altercations, either manipulated by it or killed by it. And then, of course, simultaneously, these individual investigations are all going to come together, and they're going to fight it in some final battle back at the airfield, I assume, where the excavation is happening. So I think that's the shape of the season, I would predict at this point. And I think they're slowly rolling it out because it's 9 episodes to roll this out. And I'm somewhat interested, like you said, I'm more interested in like what's happening with those African-American airmen and some of the issues they're dealing with. I think it's very telling what they're revealing here, that here is like a New England set show. And I think it's very important that we actually see it's 1962, and this black boy and this white boy are sitting together at the food counter in this deli, because it's not the South. They're not being like segregated. But of course, that doesn't mean that there isn't still some subtext of racism there. These soldiers are being given this, they're in a meritocracy. And that's actually true, that a lot of Black men found actual career paths in the military, which was not a racist, at least not in being able to achieve a rank, not racist because the government facilitated that. But they're still being used to some extent, right? They're being basically put into a circumstance that like no one else wants to be flying those planes into that region, right? So it's like, if you want to keep your status, you just have to play along, which is literally said here at one point in the show.
And I like the idea with Hanlon's wife. She's a teacher, but she said thinks she might not be able to get a teaching job teaching white and black kids in this town, but she was thinking of taking up her activism again, which the military guys went, yeah, maybe. Just have a think about how that's going to reflect on us.
And that I think that is an interesting theme that is being explored a little bit here, but exactly that idea that on the one hand, she doesn't have that freedom outside of the military. And then they're like, well, we have that opportunity inside the military, but only if we play by the rules. I mean, and it's this understanding that they all have to deal with all the time. That's what makes that a little more interesting. The Losers Club, like you mentioned, that whole sequence, first of all, the kids aren't that compelling. The storyline's not that compelling. And and that whole sequence in the cemetery was just like not very effective at all.
Oof. Yeah.
Rough CGI. So another mediocre episode.
I have to say, but I'm still interested in watching it. I still really enjoy some of the look of it, this kind of storybook look. Oh, we haven't talked about the opening titles yet.
Right.
This is the second time that we've seen them. They go on a bit, but I think they're pretty funny. And I think the animation is really great in it. And I'm interested to see the actual story playing into those titles. And I think there's deeper stories with like the fire in the barn or all sorts of things that go deep into it lore, which I'm not super familiar with, but yeah, I'm still pretty thrilled to see.
Yeah, that there's like actual headlines. These are Easter eggs that will probably be explored over the course of the show. But the headlines, even in It Chapter 2, I think it was, and in the novels as well, they see these headlines and discover that it has been there multiple times before. There is the Ironworks explosion in 1906 on Easter during an Easter egg hunt that killed a whole bunch of people. And we see the rabbit on fire and kids running away from the fire. So that is definitely a reference to that. And there also was the Bradley gang. So it was these brothers who were gangsters who were bullying the town. And then the town one day rose up and massacred them, which is, by the way, something that actually happened to another set of brothers, gangster brothers, in Maine, in Bangor, Maine, which is where Stephen King actually lives. So based loosely on a true story. But we see that too. We see this gangster in the street being like gunned down by the citizens. So these are stories that are in the novel and in the headlines during that investigation we see. But in the novels, they don't go into it in great detail. This is like what they've built the show around, like these headlines from the newspapers, and they've just spun them out into these other stories. Even this itself, that Hanlon, in the book, we just hear that Mike Hanlon's father was rescued from shooting at a club by Dick Halloran. So, of course, this is how Dick Halloran. So it's just an expansion of these tiny little tidbits of it lore, like you mentioned.
Which is cool.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's enough to make a TV show out of, but no.
Well, we're saying that it's not
3 seasons.
Can
we make 3 seasons out of a show out of 4 or 5 headlines? Can we do it? Let's see. We'll find out. All right. Next week, Darren, are you planning to see The Running Man?
I am planning to see it, and I've had a little bit of interest from my wife, so I'm not sure whether she's a fan of the actor, but I'll take it, and we will try to, carve out some time in our busy lives to see Edgar Wright's The Running Man.
By the way, Darren, did you know that The Running Man and Predator, the Schwarzenegger Predator, came out the same year?
Excellent. Yeah, I think I was aware of that. Yeah, I thought you were going to say the same day, which would have been pretty impressive.
And that's 2 weeks, just 2 weeks apart, getting the latest versions of those both.
I feel like I really enjoyed the Schwarzenegger one as a kid, and I may have rewatched it along the line and it didn't hold up in my memory. So I might not revisit that one.
I remember seeing Predator in the movie theater and being so excited for Schwarzenegger's next movie. And then I went and see Running Man on its opening weekend. And man, I was pretty disappointed, even as a teenager, even in the 80s, I was pretty disappointed. So not one of his best works. Can only go up from here.
Who is the director of that original Running Man?
Oh, God, I don't know. I don't think it's anyone important.
Okay.
But a lot of those movies have like no name directors, but I could be wrong about that. But yeah, we will see. I assume Edgar Wright is an upscale By the way, definitely a remake of the movie and not of the original story, which is barely a story. So this is very much more playing on the Schwarzenegger film, a huge expansion of that story in this new version rather than the original Stephen King story itself. But hey, we'll be checking it out. And we'll review it here on the podcast. And maybe Welcome to Derry will be better next week. We'll see.
Better, more of the same. Who knows? I'll be watching.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be checking in. And of course, we'll be checking out Pluribus and get Darren's opinion of the next episode of that as well.
Yes. Yeah, very much looking forward to that. It's good to see some thought-provoking television, and I enjoyed the way that you tie it into your own themes, and yeah, it's fascinating to watch it and read articles and listen to podcasts such as yours to try to unpack it a little bit.
And yours, Darren. It's yours as well.
Thanks, Victor.
All right. Thanks again. And we'll talk about all of that next week.
Awesome. See you next week.
All right. Thanks. Bye.